Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Hello and welcome to all. My name is Dr. Stephen Oliver, or I'm known as Dr. O. Welcome to my podcast, Taking the Next Steps in Leadership. This podcast is designed for newer or mid-level managers, and the purpose of this is to give them some tips, techniques on taking that next step in their career. However, anyone can join because throughout our life cycle, we all are taking the next steps. So other folks can join this. I invite senior leaders, executives, business owners, learning leaders, human resource management leaders, nursing leaders, and academic professors to come in and talk a little bit about their career. Tell us about how they got to where they are. What are some success factors that got them to their leadership? And so it's really great to have this wonderful group of folks come in and talk about taking that next step. So today I'm really excited and honored to have my guest today. This is Jess Jones. Jess is an executive with 22 years experience in the healthcare industry. And she most recently worked as a division chief officer and division leader for a nationally recognized healthcare consulting firm, where she led new service growth and business development. Jess is currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Pennsylvania in the Graduate School of Education and the Wharton School. She's scheduled to graduate in May 2025. I'm going to be so excited to call her Dr. Jones, but a little ways to go, and we'll talk about that. But she's focusing in her studies areas of leadership development, organizational dynamics, and adult learning. And in addition, she works as an executive trainer, public speaker, speaker coach, presenting, coaching on the topics of leadership, sales growth, and change management. By the way, she came into my University of Virginia class this past summer. I teach at UVA ethics in healthcare. This is a healthcare program, and she came in and gave a great lecture on ethics in healthcare and some things around sales and billing. And that was really, really great, but technical. Jess also has undergraduate degrees in psychology, business information systems. She has a master's in interdisciplinary telecommunications. And she has long been passionate about communication and people interactions. She's devoted much of her career to using these skills to develop others and address organizational challenges. She's going to talk about some of that today. And then lastly, and in her busy schedule, all that she's doing, she works at the University of Pennsylvania, and she is an active board member for Dawn Giddens Foundation. And I may not have said that correctly, but helping women advance in their healthcare as healthcare leaders through scholarships and mentoring. So very busy. Welcome, Jess. Really glad to have you. How are you? How are you doing today?
I am doing great. It is a beautiful morning here in Denver, Colorado, and it's just such a pleasure to get to start out my day with you, Dr. O.
Well, that's great. I'm so glad that we connected, and I invited you and you accepted, and really glad to hear your topic today. We're going to talk a little bit about creating safety in the workplace. That's pretty much the topic we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about you first. Jess, what are some things that you're up to today?
Well, gosh, you gave me such a kind intro. I think you covered a lot of them. The one other thing that I will share in the work that I'm doing right now is I own a company called Back to Human Partners with two other wonderful co-founders. And we have the opportunity to do just what you described, Dr. O, which is we go in and we work with organizations to really help them understand, how do I create authentic leadership? How do I create safety in the work that I'm doing, whether that's in a consulting firm and the interactions they're having between individuals or between clients. I also do a lot of work with individuals that are doing sales development. I come in and do sales development training and speaker coaching. So it's a lot of fun, and I get to do all of that at the same time that I am also working on my doctorate, as you mentioned, in education, specifically focused on organizational interactions, which I really just think is a fancy way of saying I get to study how we talk to each other in the workplace. And it's just a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. That's great. I think since you mentioned that, I'll ask you about that, and then I wanted to just talk a little bit about your consulting in healthcare. So, what prompted you to go back to school, to go back and get a doctoral degree? That's a huge endeavor, and I mean, I did it a long time ago. But what prompted you to do that?
I had always wanted to do that. I am definitely the, qualified lifelong learner. I love learning. I love going to school. And that was something that I loved about being in healthcare consulting. And, we can talk about that more later if you'd like, but that opportunity to just always learn and grow. And I always knew when I graduated with my master's degree that I wanted to go back and get my doctorate degree. And I think, like a lot of people, especially those of us working in healthcare during COVID, we certainly kind of reassessed where we were in our lives and just realized, hey, there's probably no time like the present to go back and do something that you want to
Right.
do.
Yes.
And so I just took that opportunity, kind of put my whole corporate job on pause. I'd had a wonderful 20-year career working in healthcare consulting and just said, you know what, now's the time. I'm going to go back and do that. And was fortunate enough to get accepted into an amazing program at the University of Pennsylvania, and am currently working through that process. And it's just been spectacular.
It is an amazing program, and I had such a pleasure of seeing you at a recent reunion for alumni and current students, and it was great to reconnect. But you said something really powerful, Jess. If you want to do something, do it now. And I really admire you and those in the program who are just going for it and doing it now, because it is a big change in our lives, and we got to put some things on hold and studying,
Mhm.
and all of the above. May I ask you, what's something that has been really positive about this program and going and get your doctorate, and maybe something that's a little challenging? Just, again, for our listeners, if they may want to do something like this.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, I'll start with the challenges, maybe, which are probably not unexpected for everyone when you think about going and getting your doctorate and still, having to work and have some sort of day job is, finding that time to balance the work and the studying and the research, the classwork that you're going to do. And so, I've spent a lot of time talking to people. You mentioned that I'm doing some teaching at Penn. I actually do some teaching with all the new incoming students into the same program that I'm currently a doctoral candidate for. And we spend a lot of time talking about, for your professional development, how do you manage in your time? So that's certainly been a big challenge. But I have to say, gosh, it is outweighed by so many of the positives that I love about going back and getting your doctorate. I would say if anybody is interested in doing that, absolutely go for it. It is such an incredible experience to get to spend that time focused on your research and what you want to learn about. And that's just incredibly rewarding. And I think it's particularly rewarding for someone who's gone and worked for a number of years, because you really have maybe a better sense of who you are and what you're interested in. I'm making a very blanket statement there. That's probably not true of
Right.
everybody, but it certainly was for me. And just have that opportunity to say, wow, these are things I'm really interested in. For me, it was how people interact in the workplace, particularly in the way the workplace continues to change in this very virtual global environment we have. And so to get to really dig in and learn more about that, learn what the science tells me about that, and then get to contribute to that research, contribute to that science, it's just very exciting and it's very rewarding.
Well, that's so powerful. And I continue to do that myself as new topics come up, the teaching I'm doing. And it's just wonderful to have that background to continue to help you to research. Also, lifelong friends from some of those who
Mhm.
went through that cohort. And now I'm meeting newer people in the program like you. And so they're lifelong. Many have been in my podcasts. And so it's just such a wonderful experience. But I really appreciate you sharing that. Before we get into your research, do you mind just saying something a little bit about some of your consulting and in healthcare and what you've done and how that connects to your research and then the topic of today? Ooh, that
Oh
would be
yeah,
good.
absolutely. I'd love to. So yeah, so I spent 20 years in healthcare consulting, and what a just I'm just so grateful for that experience because for two reasons. One, I got to work in healthcare, which is a rewarding place to work.
Mhm.
You talk to so many people that are really there. They're all about the mission. They're all about figuring out how do we help people. And I got to work with a lot of hospitals, a lot of clinics that were really thinking about, okay, how do I not only help people today, but how do I set myself up so that I'm helping people tomorrow and in the future? And really work, we have a colleague in that we both have, doctoral, that has also gone through the problem or the program and talks about this concept of wicked problems. And
Mhm.
healthcare is nothing else if not a wicked problem, right?
Yeah,
And it was just really exciting to get to spend a lot of time going through and doing just a lot of problem solving in healthcare. And the really neat thing about consulting is that you are facing new problems all the time. Everything is constantly changing. You're working with new individuals within your own company. You're working with new individuals with whoever your client is in a new place, in a new environment, in a new culture. And so I'll get to that in a minute because that is definitely very relevant as it relates to my research. But I'll just share, an interesting story in terms of, the serendipity of life. I didn't actually ever plan to go into healthcare or consulting. My background, you talked about my degrees. So my master's degree in interdisciplinary telecommunications is an engineering degree. And so I had actually planned to go in and be an engineer and was in fact working for this database company who had hired me part-time while I was finishing up my master's with the plan of hiring me full-time after I graduated. And as I neared graduation, they came to me and they just said, "We are so sorry to tell you this, but for the first time ever, when we made an offer like this to somebody who's in school, we can't actually bring you on full time."
yeah,
Now, I'm going to date myself here, Dr. O, but I think you and I are of an age, so you will appreciate this.
right,
This was back in 2001, 2002 during that tech bubble burst. And for those leaders that may be listening that may have no idea what that tech bubble burst was, it's not dissimilar to what we're experiencing now with, say, Bitcoin or even streaming services,
right,
right? Where we have this experience where we were growing and growing and growing from a technology perspective. And then suddenly everyone turned around and said, wait a minute, how do we make money at this?
right,
And the same thing was happening then, only with the internet, which is crazy to think about now. And nobody had thought about how to maximize ad revenue or anything through the internet. So it was a terrible time to be an engineer. And I just, at the time, felt really frustrated about that experience, but now feel so lucky because I happened to find a little company that did healthcare consulting and they were looking
hmm
to hire engineers to be part of the work that they were doing. And it just put me on an entirely different path that I am forever grateful for.
Well, that is a really great story, and I always feel and think it's true. When a door closes, there are others to open, even open a window. So, when one thing closes, something leads you to something else. So that's so great you've gone into that. And I appreciate also that comment about wicked problems because healthcare, certainly, I've worked in it myself. And, one problem leads to the other, to the other, to the other. And it's very frustrating. So you alluded to your research. Can you tell us a little bit about your research and then how it connects to today's topic?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So, my research is really focused on safety in the workplace. And what got me really interested in this is, we've all had the opportunity to have great leaders, maybe have less great leaders, to have maybe been a great leader, to have maybe not always been a great leader. And I can certainly talk a little bit about that too. In fact, maybe I'll start there. Very early in my career, I was maybe just a couple of years into doing this work. And, I got the opportunity to supervise somebody for the first time, which is always an exciting milestone in anybody's career. But I was not very good at it. I had absolutely no training in how to do it. And I was working with an individual that admittedly didn't really like his job. I wasn't really very happy to be there. And I found anytime I had to kind of course correct in what he was doing, I found I had to kind of raise my voice a little bit. Otherwise, he just wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. And months later, talking to my own manager about this and sharing this experience, because she was asking me, well, how's it going your first time supervising somebody? And saying, man, I just feel like I have to raise my voice all the time with John. Otherwise, he just doesn't listen. And she said, I noticed that. Have you ever thought about asking him why that is? And it was just like this aha moment for me that, rather than just sort of reacting to him, I could have created this space with him to just say, hey, John, why is it that, if I, gently try to say something to you, you kind of ignore me. But if I raise my voice, then I get a response from you and I get that course correction. So it was my first interaction with the idea of, creating safety for somebody that would allow for correction, for betterment of everybody in the workplace. So fast forward 20 years now to me doing my research, and I spent a lot of time really focusing as a leader on how I create safety coming out of that experience, because I realized when I do that, I create greater collaboration, I create greater innovation. People are even more productive and they're just happier to work together. And I think that's a lot of fun and really exciting. And I was just kind of wondering, why that is and how that works. But more than that, I was really intrigued by the fact that more and more, we don't work in these standard traditional offices where, I work with the same team
Yes.
and I have the
Yes.
same job and the same boss for years and years and years. Our lives are very matrixed now in a lot of office workplaces where I may have 2 or 3 different bosses that I'm kind of responsible to. I may have 2 or 3 different teams that I'm interacting with. And those may be teams that are in my office place. They may be teams that are across the country or across the globe. So I may be working virtually as well as in person. And very often we're seeing a lot of organizations partner together. And so I'm even working with teams that are in an entirely different organization. And it creates these very interesting dynamics that are a little different from how we've traditionally talked about the concept of safety, which is a very static leader creates this safe space for all of his or her employees. And now we just don't have that kind of clarity around, who is this leader? Who are their employees? And how do we create that safety? And that's really what got me into my research, which is really understanding, okay, what steps do we take? Do we understand how we create safety and how we can do it very, very quickly? Because when we're working in these very matrix situations, we're often under a pretty big deadline to move things forward. So that's a little bit about my research and kind of the origin story, if you will, of how that got started.
Well, there's so much to unpack there. There's so many things I have to ask you, but we have a certain amount of time. I'm just curious if John even recognized he was talking loud.
Yeah, I don't know that he did, and unfortunately, the timing of this, this is a whole other conversation. The feedback that I got from my manager about this was, at the end of the project. So I really never had a chance to go back to him and have that conversation and help him understand, why is it we have to have these very intense conversations to get you to be responsive to some of the guidance that I'm trying to give you? Because then he was off to another project and I was off to another project, which is kind of the world of consulting. And so I was reflecting on that even this morning as I thought about our discussion and thought, man, I wonder how he's doing. Maybe it's not too late even now to go back and have that conversation with him.
Well, you never know. So, Jeff, you kind of led
Mhm.
into this, but why is it so important that a leader create a safe space in the workplace for everybody?
Yeah, it's funny. We want to think that everybody's just going to get along and do their job, but the reality is, as leaders, our job is to support other people in being successful in the work that they're doing. And what we're finding, what the research and the science is telling us, is that in order to do that, we need to create this safe space that allows people to share unique ideas. Otherwise, we just get this kind of echo chamber where everyone's talking about the same thing they know, they're comfortable with, and we kind of shut down anybody that might have a new idea and might
Right.
want to come forward. And so we have all these organizations going, man, why am I not more innovative? Why are my employees not more innovative? And we don't realize that we've kind of created this culture, this environment where we shut down unique ideas because they're different. If we create safe spaces where we say, hey, I want to hear that unique idea. I want to hear that interesting, different off the wall thing that maybe your background, which is very different from my background, brings to mind for you in this particular situation. We suddenly create this innovation and this, what I think of as a very healthy tension where we're testing each other and really asking each other, what is the best thing? And that is incredibly powerful. But if we don't create that safe space, we won't allow for that innovation and that ability to collaborate around those unique ideas.
Well, that's fantastic because we want new ideas to solve those wicked problems.
Yeah.
And it almost sounds like there's a little bit of group think in that, where they're all thinking the same way and we're shutting things down. So I really like that response and what you're saying about getting new ideas, getting new information, and getting people to feel comfortable. You had mentioned earlier that you had some steps. What are some steps that a manager can take to create a safe space and safety for all?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say these are steps. And one thing that I just want to clarify when we talk about managers or leaders, Dr. O, is
Mhm.
that I want to offer and challenge everybody. You are a leader. You are a manager. Don't just assume that the leader is that person with that title. I really believe from the second you enter the workforce, you have the potential and you are a leader.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
title isn't what about makes you a leader. And I've certainly experienced that in my life. And I think anybody else who has stepped forward and exhibited those leadership qualities would be able to acknowledge that as well. So I would say for any leader, whether you have that title or not, and this is very relevant in those very matrixed environments where, it's not always clear who the leader is. There are really three steps that I have found. And the first one is having empathy, right? And this may not be a huge
Mhm.
surprise, but when we talk about being open to those unique ideas, we need to have empathy for that individual and the differences they're bringing, the differences in background, the differences in thought that they're bringing, so that we can acknowledge and be ready for those new ideas that they're bringing forward and be open to those new ideas. The second one is self-regulation. So I talked about these idea of these, companies are going, why don't we innovate? And I think the problem is you have somebody come forward with that new idea. Maybe you have a little empathy for the fact that it's a new idea, but you don't then self-regulate and immediately go, no, 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 that's not how we do it here. Instead, we need to self-regulate and really say, okay, well, rather than saying no or but, how do I say yes and come
Yes.
forward and really be open to
Uh-huh.
this new idea and how it might actually work with the problem that we're trying to solve. So those are the first two. And then the third one is really adaptability. So this is really taking my empathy, taking my
Mhm.
self-regulation, and really taking action with that and being adaptable. And as part of that, like I said, that yes, and where I'm
Mhm.
coming forward and saying, okay, how do I take that new idea and actually turn it into action? And I think that's where you really become the leader in
Mhm.
that situation, is not just being open and taking in that new idea and being responsive to it, but then really truly taking that action. And that's a lot of what the research tells us too, is that if you want to go from a really great conversation to actually really great success, you have to have that adaptability component as your third component there.
Well, some of this sounds a lot like emotional intelligence. And one of the mentors and leaders of the doctoral program is Dr. Annie McKee. And she's written a lot of great books and helped to lead the program you're in and that I was in. But it sounds like a great connection to emotional intelligence. Certainly, there's Dr. Daniel Goleman. Any thoughts on why it might be important to have solid emotional intelligence in safety?
Yeah, well, and thank you for bringing up Dr. McKee. I'm a huge fan of hers. I've read a lot of what she has written, and she and I have actually had a lot of conversations about this. And she helped me kind of see what I was seeing in the research, and certainly identified, hey, these are foundational components to emotional intelligence. I don't necessarily set it up as emotional intelligence because there is a
Yes.
lot to that, and
Right.
certainly, Dr. McKee could tell you that. And I'm not pretending to say, hey, let me explore all the components of emotional intelligence, which is where I've really kind of boiled it down to kind of these three that I'm seeing in the
Mhm.
research that tells us this is the way that you kind of create safety. But I would certainly echo your point that,
Mhm.
emotional intelligence is an essential part of how you be successful here. So anyone that is looking at, how do I create safety? A great place to start, frankly, a great place for anyone that wants to, grow as a leader to start, is to look and understand the concept of emotional intelligence. And one of the most important things I know that I learned, we certainly know through the research as well, is I think some people think, oh, well, it's an intelligence is something you have or you don't have. And what we know about emotional intelligence is anybody who wants to can learn this. So
Mhm.
really understanding it, looking at people that do that well and thinking about, okay, how do I take that in? How do I emote that same emotional intelligence in my own interactions can be just incredibly powerful, whether you're trying to create safety or anything else.
Well, I think that that is so important to say who wants to. As there are those who want to learn in the workplace and others who may not. I don't know if that guy John was one of those, but hopefully today he wants to. But you said something really powerful, Jess, in respect to everyone's a leader, coming into the workplace. I was on a team years ago in healthcare, and we were delivering a leadership program, and our boss said everyone is going to take 1 week and lead this. So all the way up from the senior director down to our administrative professional took the lead, and we were all leaders in that program. So that is really powerful that you made that comment. I appreciate that. Any thoughts about giving and receiving feedback? Because I think that also goes hand in hand with safety.
Absolutely. But first, I just have to acknowledge, Dr. O, how cool is that? That is not something I have ever done, but what a
Okay.
wonderful way to just help everybody understand, one, that they are a leader, and
Mhm.
two, what leadership looks like from the perspective of that individual. I think we're all better leaders when we have that opportunity to kind of look in the mirror and understand the challenges that we each experience coming from different approaches as
Mhm.
leaders. But you asked about giving and receiving feedback. I think we talk about the concept of a feedback culture. And in
Mhm.
order to have a feedback culture, we have to have safety. And that means we really all need to be open to this. And this is where I come back to, we're all leaders, right, in this organization or in any organization. And so if I am a leader and I want to be a better leader, I need to be open to feedback. I need to recognize that it's not just about delivering feedback to other people, but having that openness to receiving it. And as soon as I open up to that idea that I also want to receive feedback and I model that for other people, they can see me do that. You start to create that feedback culture where everyone recognizes, oh, this is a safe thing to do. This is something that we do as part of our
Mhm.
culture. It's something that we desire, right, and want to bring forward. Because, I always tell people when I'm coaching them and I do workshops on giving and receiving feedback, and I just talk about the fact that feedback is a gift, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, wow, man, I can't wait to tell Jess what a terrible job she did in that meeting yesterday, right?
Yikes! Wow.
But if I'm going to have that conversation with Jess, I'm thinking about it more because I want Jess to be successful. I want her to not make that same mistake as she made in that meeting yesterday. So I'm going to take the time to have this uncomfortable conversation. And if I'm just receiving that feedback, if I can recognize that my manager, my leader has created that safe space for me to understand the feedback that she's trying to deliver to me, that's just incredibly powerful. So yeah, I would agree. That feedback culture to me is almost something, it's a positive outcome of what it
Mhm.
means when you create that safe space in the workplace.
And if your manager has created that culture, then there's no surprise. Today I'm
Mhm.
going to give you some really good feedback on one you did yesterday with that customer. Tomorrow I'm going to give you some feedback on something you could do better. So it's not a surprise,
Mhm.
and really help with feeling safe. May I ask you, Jess, about your thoughts on a partnership with human resources in creating safety in the workplace? Some companies have great human resources departments, others are can be a little, challenging. But any thoughts about working with human resources in that safe space and creating it?
I'm a big fan of working with human resources, Dr. O. I agree. Certainly, it's going to vary, how your human resources department is. Like any department in any organization, they can be different, have different cultures, different philosophies. Having said that, I'm seeing a big shift in human resources these days where, it's really going away from this sort of isolated function to a partnership across the organization. And I think most people that I talk to, at least in HR, really want that partnership. They're not there to just kind of be this isolated person you go to with a problem, but they want to be this partner to really help you think about, how do I grow the organization? How do I grow the people within the organization? And I think that's very powerful. And my experience has been, when you create that partnership with human resources, you are a better leader. You are a better manager of your people, because they have a lot of incredible expertise that they bring around human interaction, around people's behaviors, and even how to be responsive when somebody might be struggling in an organization. So I'm a big fan of partnering with HR. And I think the opportunity here is, as we talk with leaders around safety in the workplace, when we talk with HR about this, I think HR can really start to bring some of those tools, some of that individual training, some of that leadership training that really can help leaders understand, what are those steps? Like I described, things like empathy, self-regulation, and most importantly, adaptability, that these leaders can then bring in, and that will help create that innovation. And that's pretty exciting, because not a lot of people go, if I partner with HR, my company might be more innovative. But HR has a lot of the abilities, whether they're doing that internal or bringing in an external organization, to provide that kind of leadership development that will allow for that innovation by creating a safe space in the organization.
Well, that's well said. And I guess I should have said people, the people department. I sound old using human resources. There's a lot of people officer jobs out there. So, but I agree with you. They can really be there. And, post COVID, during COVID, where we are at today, there are heightened emotions everywhere, and people are frustrated. And some workplaces can be a little, you know, I want to use the word dangerous, but I don't want to scare people off. But there can be some frustrations. But the development side, they can really be there to help develop talent with you. And to me, that creates a safety. You mentioned trainings. My next question is about trainings. What do you think about having safety trainings or certain types of trainings to, connect with working with the people department?
You know, what I think about that is that what we call it is really important in this case. So, one of the things that I found as I'm researching safety, some people call it psychological safety, is that those terms can kind of put people off a little bit. They think, oh, that's that squishy stuff, psychological safety, or telling me I have to be nice to everybody and nobody has to work hard. And that's not at all, right, what I'm talking about. And certainly I hope it's not what's come across as we've been talking here. But I think if we talk about, how could HR help us create leadership innovation workshops,
Hmm.
that's a whole different conversation, where it's like, yes, as a leader, I want to figure out how to be more innovative, how to help my teams be more innovative. Absolutely. That's something I get really excited about. And then we talk about safety as kind of a component of that innovation, and as rather than as the outcome, because I think people don't really want to think about safety as an outcome, which is sort of a
Hmm.
sad state, possibly, if you think about that. But if we think about what we get out of safety, when we get that innovation, when we get that collaboration, when we get that productivity, that's incredibly powerful. And I have to say, if that's the way I get people to create more safety in the organization, by talking about it in those terms, I'm happy to do it, because we know that also means people are just going to be better in their jobs and be happier in their jobs if we can create that safety, regardless of the outcome you're trying to achieve.
Well, and I think there's so many people, when they see you must take this compliance training, sexual harassment, Title VII in education, actually even occupational safety and health. When we see these, or respect training in the workplace, when we see these, I think people can roll their eyes, and they're figuring out, how do I scroll through to the end to complete? But I truly believe that there are reminders in all of those, reminders of the basic ways to treat people and have respect. Um, so even though they can seem daunting, I think they are powerful. And you mentioned that. I think one final question that just kind of came in my brain now: how does safety connect to trust in the workplace? That just kind of connect. I've been thinking about that as we've been talking.
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and there is a lot of research on
Yeah.
that. So I
Yes.
will say, it connects in two very interesting ways. So trust helps us create safety. So we have to think about the components of how we create trust. And some of what I've talked about around that empathy and self-regulation in particular are components that really help us to create trust. But what's very interesting is that trust is also an outcome of safety. So if we can create a little bit of trust through that empathy, through that self-regulation, where we start to create that safe space, then we actually create even greater trust coming out of that. So it is both a precursor and an outcome
Hmm.
to an environment of safety.
That's nice. Precursor and outcome. Start, finish. Fantastic. Well, this has really been just a really powerful conversation today. Any final thoughts about creating safe spaces, creating safety in the workplace?
Just as a final thought, I'll just say to all those leaders out there that, this is not something that's hard to do. And as soon as you start to do it, you will see those rewards in the way your team is behaving. And again, whether you are officially a leader with that title or you are just somebody that you interact with, creating that safe space with the people you're going to work with, you are going to feel better in the way you're interacting with people. People are going to be more excited in the way they interact with you. And it will be just incredible the outcomes that you see. We've talked about the concepts of collaboration and innovation. I would also offer, creating a broader network, and you just
Mhm,
never know where those opportunities are going to come from. Dr. O, you talked about, the network and all the great people that we've met through the doctoral program that we
mhm.
are both a part of. So just being and embracing that concept. And again, not as a squishy thing, but just as a person that people want to interact with will pay off for you as a leader in so many ways that you're just never going to imagine.
Wonderful words. And I'll give a little shameless plug. My last podcast last week was Dr. Mary McNevin, and her topic was on networking and the value of it. So I'm so glad that you said that. It's so important. Well, thank you so much, Jess Jones, a organizational development leadership consultant. Her career motto or her career passion is developing others and also helping addressing organizational challenges. She is in the process of finishing her doctorate of education at the University of Pennsylvania, and I am just so excited about our conversation today. And Jess, I really look forward to a podcast next spring, if you'll join me, where I can call you Dr. Jess Jones.
Thank you so much, Dr. O. What a pleasure it's been today.
Well, thank you everybody for coming to my podcast, Taking the Next Steps in Leadership. And I'm here to help you and assist you through my consulting company, HRC Vision, Leadership and Learning. And if there's anything I can do to help you in your career, let me know. And then also, Jess Jones is here to help you in anything that you may need. So please get in contact with us and hope you enjoyed. And thank you very much for coming today.
You've been tuning in to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.